Welcome to Intentional Conversations. Remember that a conversation can change your life, and I hope this one does. I'm Connie Wilder with my partner, Sue Riekels. Hello, Sue. Welcome to the concept of building and how to build trust with ourselves, with each other, with another person. And so I want to start with this concept of positive psychology's definition of trust, and they've got four things to build trust. One is honesty, one is consistency, one is competency, and then empathy. And that really cements it for me. Those elements to be honest, to be consistent in what I do, and then also competent and to be empathetic. Those four elements are for me the pillars of trust. Sue, how about for you? How do you define trust?
Well, thank you, Connie, for the introduction. And I am pleased to be with you and with everyone that's listening in. I agree with that definition. And two of those really stand out, and that is authenticity, which we had just spoken about in last week's podcast, and the consistency, or I say follow through as well. Like, be true to what you say you are, be true to what you say you're going to do, and follow through, and consistently follow through. When we can't, it's also own it. I really missed the mark there and I'm so sorry. And we take ownership of it. Because none of us are perfect. And it's that people can trust that if something does go wrong, we will own it and we won't blame anyone else. And I think all of those builds this foundation of trust. So over your experience, Connie, are there examples that you can think of or times that you've seen somebody do this well, or characteristics of what that looks like when you've
Yeah.
experienced it?
One of the things I will say about trust, and that is I've been a coach for more than 20 years, and the clients that come into my practice are largely referral-based clients. And sometimes I've never met the person before, but it comes from a referral of a highly trusted individual. And that component, that element of trust is huge because in coaching, if the coaching works, it's because the client does the work. And let's face it, coaching is work. It's work at its best. There's no secret sauce that I have or that some other coach has. My secret sauce is helping other people find their secret sauce. That's my superpower, if you will. And it's gone into questions and elements. Yet the people that come to me have a high level of trust in me, in my ability, in who I am as a human being, and then the way I show up, that consistency, that honesty, that empathy, that it all matters. It all matters greatly. It all matters significantly. Trust is a piece that it's broken so easily. With it can be broken so easily in any kind of professional or personal relationship. How about for you, Sue? How do you see trust playing out in your own lives, in your own life?
Similarly, um, people don't necessarily trust someone that they know nothing about. And as a professional, similarly, they might come to me. However, there is a level of trust. Either they've talked to me personally, there's been a relationship, there's something that shifted for them to build this trust. Now, I've had a handful of people who just found me and called me. I want to just say that takes a lot of courage, I believe, to go see someone you know nothing about besides what their webpage says. And then it is about showing up in a way that builds that foundation from zero, ground zero. And how do we build that trust up? And that is that reliability, consistency. Sue always shows up this way. That starts to build that foundation. And I know in my own personal life, working for individuals who were reliable and consistent is what I think impacted me the most to build that trust with them, is I could trust their word, what they said They did. Their yeses meant yes, their noes meant noes. And if they supported me, I knew it. If they disagreed with me, I also knew it. And to me, that was a foundation of trust that no matter, I didn't have to question if they were going to do or if they meant what they were saying, because they always did it. Or if they didn't, then they circled back. I messed up on that. I'm sorry. And they would change it. So those are ways that I think I've experienced it. I also hopefully show up in a trustworthy way. And I think it's different in all of our relationships a little bit too, like from a work perspective to our spouse to that of children. It's important in all of them. And I think there's different aspects, but the same threads go through. And going back to those key ones that you said originally, authenticity, I believe, empathy, showing empathy, being competent, I think was the other one. And lastly, I think I said authenticity. So those four are crucial to all of those different areas of our life. So if you think about the differences professionally versus personally versus as a parent, anything you see might be a different thread in that? Or do you find them similar all through those relationships? What are your thoughts, Connie?
Oh my gosh, it's a good question. And so you mentioned that thread, right? And that thread, for me, it's a thread, right? It's that thread of all those consistencies and all that empathy and all that authenticity and honesty and caring. It's that thread that is the through line between my personal and professional life, right? And so that is for me enormously valuable, the thread that takes me from one to another. And yet sometimes because I'm so there for my clients, I am all in 1,000% in for my clients. I mean, my kids know not to knock on the door even at a young age unless it was an emergency when my door is closed. Like they knew that and they respected that boundary, if you will. And so that allows me to be all in when I am focused on a client. And so that's one piece, but that thread of authenticity, it's that thread that brings me into my personal life as well. And that thread, I mean, I've been married for 27 plus years. My husband doesn't want to be coached, right? And so he doesn't want to coach for a wife. He wants a wife for a wife, a woman um, for a wife. And so I have to like put my coaching hat on the shelf, if you will. And yet I also get to bring everything I know because I am a human being and I can't separate some things and not have some things enter my life or enter my school of thought, if you will. Sue, how about you? How do you do it?
Well, I think a key piece for me is also not sharing other people's information. So the whole gossip piece. If I'm with somebody who is talking about someone else and is critical, it just gives me a pause of, okay, then what are you saying about me?
Totally.
And vice versa. I would hope that they would question if I'm saying, now it's one thing, like if it's out of concern, did you hear so and so's in the hospital and they could use help? Yes, we want to share that kind of information, but not from a gossiping standpoint as much as from a care standpoint. So as I think about this trust piece, it is having really healthy boundaries. So as a leader, not sharing any information about teammates with each other, about relationships with children, like not sharing what's going on with one kid to the other and vice versa, like having those strong boundaries so what they know if they come to you, their information is going to be held and not shared. To me, that is also a huge piece. And I think it falls under the umbrella of reliability and probably authenticity as well. That empathy piece, like you can see somebody showing empathy and they aren't talking to you about the details.
Definitely authenticity, like that concept of honesty and consistency and competency, that that ability to hold more than one truth. A CEO friend of mine said, client and friend said, once said to me, there's 19 perspectives. No, I'm sorry. The person said there's 19 sides to every story. And while there may not be 19, there's certainly more than one. And so that comes back to the one perspective isn't always right. And so that I know for sure. And that, as you are spot on about that ability, that foundation of trust is that ability to hold someone's confidence as well. It's important. It's super important.
Absolutely. And trust that they're holding your information just as sacredly is a key piece. Coming back to that reliability, though, I think we all need somebody, and hopefully more than one somebody, that kind of has our back. Like, if we're struggling, they got us. And that doesn't come without a level of trust. Because let's all face it, we've had bad news. We've had things that rock our world to its core. And we need these people that we deeply trust. Doesn't mean we have to share all of our secrets or whatever it is. And we know that they have this level of authenticity and commitment to themselves and to us that we hold each other with. And I think those are so valuable. As I get older, the richness of those friendships to me is beyond any wealth I could ever imagine, of beyond anything else, is that richness of having community where you have trusting, lasting, foundationally strong friendships and relationships is key. How about yourself, Connie? How have you noticed having this level of trust with the people you do? How does it impact you and how do you experience it?
Well, for one, the foundation of trust is it's everything. It's that foundation that everything gets built upon. And so that foundation of trust, it foundationally, when we speak of it, that word trust is a foundation. It is the building block of everything else. And if we can't trust ourselves, if we can't trust the other person, then we're compromised from the get-go. And so how do we build that? How do we build on that foundation? It's being honest and authentic, as well as consistency and empathy and competency, and building those elements. It's like that house of cards, and that house of cards can get blown over so quickly, and we've all had that happen to us in the past, whether it's, I mean, I'm thinking right now of the current events, and that plane crash. I mean, those people were so close to the runway, and the family and friends that are impacted, it's a life-changing event in not a positive way. And so, yeah, that's one element that I find trust to be foundational and inherent to the language is exactly what that means.
And I know working with a lot of leaders in my work, it is also about them leading the way with this trust that fosters then a trust amongst the employees as well. Um, Building that up so everybody has the same value and appreciation, and um, the fact that you're following through on what you say you're going to do, you're supporting them no matter what the issue is. All of those pieces build this strong foundation as leaders of companies that trickles down. When there's trust at this high level with the next level, it goes down to the rest of the team. And same thing, I see this with parents. If there is this level of trust between the parents and can flow down to their kids then as well, like, it's so key in all of those relationships. And it takes work. It takes courage. to lean in, to build this trust, you're going to be vulnerable. There isn't a relationship that you don't build that there's not a level of vulnerability. I might get hurt. I might get burned. This might not end up well. And the more mature we are and the more we know ourselves, I believe we're willing to take that risk because we know the richness that we also get to get out of it and give.
Yeah.
And it's worth that vulnerability with caution and, recognizing that we can't get that richness if we don't lean in and welcome it. And so as leaders and as parents and as friends, how do we show up, I guess is my question, authentically, in trusting ways so that that continues to flow into all these areas of our life.
So, Sue, let me ask you, how do you manage or how do you recommend to leaders that they manage trust when something has been significantly broken?
You know, I always say when we look at solutions versus at the problem, we start to build trust. I'm not saying things aren't going to go, and so what are we going to do about it? And what's the next step? Guiding that and having that foundation of encouragement, accountability, yes. And how do we support them in taking this next step and changing it, correcting it, whatever that takes? Everyone's going to watch that process. Now, if they're shamed, if they're brought down, and it doesn't mean sometimes it's not a hard lesson. And if we go to that area of blame and shame, nothing good comes out of it because we're just focusing on the issue. We're not focusing. I always say where there's a mistake, there's room for growth and expansion. So how can we use this experience richly to impact how we move forward? If we do that, more than likely it's not going to happen a second time because we have learned it, we understand it. And so I think that is my key takeaway is accountability and support as we approach these issues that do come.
Yeah.
How about yourself, Connie? Anything that you do differently with the individuals that you work with from a leadership standpoint?
Well, I think I said this on one other episode, and that is sometimes the best way to define trust or define whatever it is to say what it isn't. And so what it isn't is taking the call on the Bay Bridge in San Francisco when half your team or the majority of your team is being laid off. And so that happened. And so, I mean, I could give you so many examples of what degraded trust over time. And so that idea of being honest and being consistent and being competent and empathetic, because people were leaving, they were losing their jobs that day. And our CEO took the call from the Bay Bridge. And to me, that was a big no-no. That was a big, big, big no-no. So sometimes that's the best way to define things of what not to do. And so what to do, I love the idea of focusing on the solutions and focusing on where do we want to go? How do we want to show up in that, and to be mindful of showing up as our best self. I wonder if that person, if that leader would do things differently in looking back. And I certainly hope so.
Exactly. And all we can do is hope that we continue to learn and grow through these experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And we're never done. And that's the piece I think I want to end with is this process is continual. If
Yeah.
we stop working on trust, we don't have trust. How are we constantly showing up in our relationships with those key foundational pieces is an ongoing process that I hope we're continually flowing with. And speaking from my own experience, there's times it gets stuck or it gets stuck, depending on what life is showing up for me in my life. Doesn't mean, though, that the process stops.
Yeah. Yeah. The learning, growth, and development, Sue, it's a thing. The learning, growth, and development. It's an ongoing, lifelong process. And as we conclude on season one, I just want to thank you profoundly for your insight, for everything you've added to this podcast. It's been extraordinary, and it's been my pleasure working with you in this capacity. So thank you.
Thank you, Connie. It has been an honor as well. And thank you to all of our listeners. Thank you so much for following us. This is the end of season 1. I know, can you believe a season has already gone past? We welcome you to lean into building trust, all these other topics that we talked about. Notice where you're at and make it a better world.